off had only heightened their sensitivity. Each man knew Rand had no reason to be friendly toward him. Each had to wonder if his own greeting was only to cover something real with someone else. Siman and Marakan appeared the most worried, yet the others eyed those two perhaps the most suspiciously of all. Perhaps his coolness had been the true cover, or maybe that was what they were meant to think. For himself, Rand thought that Moraine would be proud of him, and so would Tom Merrill. Even if none of these seven was actively plotting against him at the moment, something he did not think even Matt would bet on, men in their positions could do much to disrupt his plans without being seen to, and they would do so from habit, if for no other reason. Or they would have. He had them off balance now. If he could keep them that way, they would be too busy watching each other and too afraid of being watched in turn to trouble him. They might even obey for once without finding 100 reasons why things should be done differently from what he wanted. Well, that might be asking too much. His satisfaction slipped when he saw Asmodean's sardonic grin. Worse was Avienda's wondering stare. She had been in the Stone of Tyr. She knew who these men were, and why he had sent them here. I do what I must, he thought sourly, and wished it did not sound as if he were trying to excuse himself. Inside, he said, more sharply than he intended, and the seven High Lords jumped as if suddenly recalling who and what he was. They wanted to crowd around him as he climbed the stairs, but except for Mylan to show the way, the maidens simply made a solid circle around him, and the High Lords brought up the rear with Asmodean and the Lesser Lords. Avienda stuck close by, of course, and Sulin was on his other side. Samara and Lamel, and Anila right behind him. They could have reached out and touched his back without stretching. He gave Avienda an accusing look, and she arched her eyebrows at him so questioningly that he almost believed she had nothing to do with it. Almost. The corridors of the palace were empty except for the dark-liveried servants who bowed almost chest to knees and curtsied just as deeply as he passed. But when he entered the Grand Hall of the Sun, he discovered that the Carianan nobility had not been excluded from the palace entirely. "The Dragon Reborn comes," intoned a white-haired man just inside the huge gilded doors, worked with the rising sun. His red coat embroidered with 6-pointed stars in blue, a little large on him after his time in Cairhien, marked him for an upper servant of Mylan's house. "All hail the Lord Dragon Randall Thor! All glory to the Lord Dragon!" A quick roar filled the chamber to its angle-vaulted ceiling, 50 paces up. "Hail the Lord Dragon Randall Thor! All glory to the Lord Dragon! The light illumine the Lord Dragon!" The silence that followed seemed twice as still by comparison. Between massive square columns of marble, thick streaked with blue so deep it was almost black, stood more Tyrans than Rand expected. Ranks of lords and ladies of the land, dressed in their finest, in peaked velvet hats and coats with puffy striped sleeves, in colorful gowns and lace ruffs, with close-fitting caps, intricately embroidered or sewn with pearls or small gems. To their rear were the Carianan, darkly garbed except for slashes of color across the breast of gown or knee-length coat. The more stripes in house colors, the higher the rank of the wearer. But men and women with color from neck to waist or lower stood behind Tyrans clearly of minor houses, with yellow embroidery instead of thread of gold and wool instead of silk. No few of the Carianan men had shaved and powdered the front of their heads. All of the younger men had. The Tyrans looked expectant, if uneasy. The Carianan faces could have been chiseled from ice. There was no way to say who had cheered and who not, but Rand suspected most of those cries had come from the front rows. "A good many wish to serve you here," Mylan murmured as they made their way up the blue-tiled floor with its great golden mosaic of the rising sun. A ripple of silent curtsies and bows followed. Rand only grunted. They wished to serve him. He did not need Moraine to know that these lesser nobles hoped to become greater on estates carved out of Cairhien. No doubt Mylan and the other 6 had already intimated, if not promised, which lands would be whose. At the far end of the Grand Hall, the Sun Throne itself stood centered atop a wide dais of deep blue marble. Even here, Kyrianan restraint held, for a throne at any rate. The great heavy-armed chair glittered with gilt and golden silk, but somehow it seemed to be all plain and vertical lines, except for the wavy-rayed rising sun that would stand above the head of whoever sat on it. That was meant to be him, Rand realized long before reaching the 9 steps to the dais. Aviendha climbed up with him, and Osmodian, as his bard, was allowed up as well. But Sulan quickly arrayed the other maidens around the dais, their casually held spears blocking Mylan as well as the rest of the High Lords. Frustration painted those Tyrant faces. The hall was so quiet that Rand could hear himself breathe. "This belongs to someone else," he said finally. "Besides, I've spent too long in the saddle to welcome such a hard seat. Bring me a comfortable chair." There was a moment of shocked silence before a murmur ran through the hall. Mylan suddenly wore such a look of speculation, quickly suppressed, that Rand nearly laughed. Very likely Osmodian was right about the man. Osmodian himself was eyeing Rand with barely hidden surmise. It was some minutes before the fellow in the star-embroidered coat ran up panting, followed by 2 dark-liveried Kyrianan, carrying a high-backed chair piled with silk-covered cushions, and pointed out where to place it with a great many worried glances at Rand. Vertical lines of gilt ran up the chair's heavy legs and back, but it seemed insignificant in front of the Sun Throne. While the 3 servants were still bowing themselves away, bending double on every step, Rand tossed most of the cushions to one side and sat down gratefully, the Seanchan spearhead on his knee. He was careful not to sigh, though. Aviendha was watching him too carefully for that, and the way Samara kept glancing from her to him and back confirmed his suspicions. But whatever his problems with Aviendha and Father Ismai, most present awaited his words with equal parts eagerness and trepidation. "At least they'll jump when I say toad," he thought. They might not like it, but they would do it. With Moraine's help, he had worked out what he must do here. Some he had known was right even without her suggestions. It would have been good to have her there to whisper in his ear if needed, instead of Aviendha waiting to signal Samara. But there was no point in waiting. Surely every Tyrant and Kyrianan noble in the city was in this chamber. "Why do the Kyrianan hang back?" he said loudly, and the crowd of nobles shifted, exchanging confused glances. "Tyrants came to help, but that is no reason for Kyrianan to hold themselves in the rear here. Let everyone sort themselves by rank. Everyone." It was difficult to say whether Tyrants or Kyrianan were the most stunned, though Mylan looked ready to swallow his tongue, and the other 6 not far behind. Even slow-burning Aracom went white in the face. With much shuffling of boots and twitching aside of skirts, with many icy stares on both sides, it was done, until the front rows were all men and women with stripes across their chests, and the second held only a few Tyrants. Mylan and his fellows had been joined at the foot of the dais by twice their number of Kyrianan lords and ladies, most graying, and everyone stripes from neck nearly to knees, though perhaps joined was not the right word. They stood in 2 groups, with a full 3 paces between, and looked away from one another so hard that they might as well have shaken fists and shouted. Every eye was on Rand, and if the Tyrants were in a fury, the Kyrianan were still ice, with only hints of a thaw in the considering way they studied him. "I have noticed the banners flying above Cairhien," he went on, once the movement stilled. "It is well that so many of the crescents of Tyr fly. Without Tyran grain, Cairhien would have no living to hoist a banner. And without Tyran swords, the people of this city who survive today, noble as well as common, would be learning to obey the Shaido. Tyr has earned her honor." That puffed up the Tyrants, of course, bringing fierce nods and fiercer smiles, though it certainly seemed to confuse the High Lords, coming on the heels of the other. For that matter, the Carianan below the dais were eyeing one another doubtfully. But I do not need so many banners for myself. Let one dragon banner remain on the highest tower of the city so all who approach can see. But let the rest be taken down and replaced with the banners of Cairhien. This is Cairhien, and the rising sun must and will fly proudly. Cairhien has her own honor, which she shall keep. The chamber erupted in a roar so suddenly that maidens hefted their spears, a roar that reverberated from wall to wall. In an instant, Sulin was flashing maiden hand talk, but already half-raised veils were being let fall. The Carianan nobles were cheering every bit as loudly as the people in the streets had, capering and waving their arms like foregaters at festival. In the pandemonium, it was the Tyrant's turn to exchange silent stares. They did not look angry. Even Marlin appeared unsure more than anything else, though like Torian and the others, he watched in amazement the lords and ladies of high rank around him, so coldly dignified a moment before, now dancing and shouting for the Lord Dragon. Rand did not know what any of them read into his words. Certainly he had expected them to hear more than he said, especially the Carianan, and perhaps even that some would hear what he really meant. But nothing had prepared him for this display. Carianan reserve was an odd thing he well knew, mixed at times with unexpected boldness. Moraine had been reticent on the matter, for all her insistence on trying to teach him everything. The most she had said was that if that reserve broke, it could do so to a surprising degree. Surprising indeed. When the cheering finally died down, the giving of oaths of fealty began. Marling was the first to kneel, tight-faced as he pledged under the light and by his hope of salvation and rebirth to serve faithfully and obey. It was an old form, and Rand hoped it might actually constrain some to keep the oath. Once Marlin had kissed the tip of the Seanchan spearhead, trying to hide a sour grimace by stroking his beard, he was replaced by the Lady Colliver. A more than handsome woman in her middle years, with dark ivory lace spilling over the hands she placed between reins, and horizontal slashes of color from high lace collar to her knees, she gave the oath in a clear, firm voice and the musical accent he was used to hearing from Moraine. Her dark gaze had something of the weighing and measuring look of Moraine as well, most especially when she eyed Avienda as she curtsied her way back down the steps. Torian replaced her, sweating as he swore, and Lord Dobrain replaced Torian, deep-set eyes probing, one of the few older men to have shaved the front of his long, mostly gray hair. Then Aracone, and Rand felt impatience as the procession continued, one by one up to kneel before him, Carianan succeeding Tyran, succeeding Carianan, as he had decreed. This was all necessary, so Moraine said, and so agreed a voice in his head that he knew for Lews Therins. But to him, it was part of the delay. He must have their loyalty, if only on the surface, in order to begin making Cairhien secure. And that beginning, at least, had to be made before he could move on Samael. And that I will do. I have too much to do yet to let him go on stabbing at my ankles from the bushes. He will find out what it means to rouse the dragon. He did not understand why those coming before him began to sweat and lick their lips as they knelt and stammered the words of fealty. But then, he could not see the cold light burning in his own eyes.
Chapter 47. The Price of a Share. Finishing her morning wash, Nynaeve toweled herself dry and pulled on a fresh silk shift reluctantly. Silk was not as cool as linen, and even with the sun only just up, the heat in the wagon foretold another scorching day. Besides which, the thing was cut, so she was half afraid it would fall in a puddle around her ankles if she breathed wrong. At least it was not damp with night sweat, as her discarded one was. Disturbing dreams had racked her sleep, dreams of Mogadine that woke her bolt upright, and those better than the ones she did not wake out of. Dreams of Brigitte shooting arrows at her and not missing. dreams of the prophet's followers rioting through the menagerie, of being stranded forever in Samara because no vessel ever came, of
Hey,
reaching
Nightmare, how
Saliha
you doing,
and
bro?
finding Elida in
Hope you're
charge,
doing well.
or Mogadine again there too. She
About
had
to light
wakened
one up.
weeping from that one. All just worry, of
Definitely
course,
happy
and
to see you,
natural
bro.
enough. 3 nights camped here without a ship appearing. 3 sweltering days of standing blindfolded against that cursed piece of wall. That was enough to put anyone on edge, even without worrying whether Mogadine was closing in. But then, just because the woman knew they were with a menagerie did not mean she had to find them in Samara. There were other traveling menageries in the
Hell yeah,
world
Nightmare.
besides those gathered here.
Definitely
Thinking
hope
up
you have a good
reasons
night's
not
sleep.
to worry was easier than not worrying, though.
But definitely
But why
appreciate you
should I be
stopping by,
anxious about
considering I
Egwene?
do my
Dipping a split
live
twig
players
into
I
a
do.
small dish of salt and soda on the washstand, she began scrubbing her teeth vigorously. Egwene had popped up in nearly every dream, yammering at her, but she could not see how Egwene came into them. In truth, anxiety and lack of sleep were only part of what made her mood vile this morning. The others were such minor things, but they were realities. A pebble in your shoe was small compared to having your head cut off, but if the pebble was there, and the chopping block might never be, it was not possible to avoid her own reflection, and her hair hanging loose about her shoulders instead of decently braided. Brush it how she would, the brassy red color never became less loathsome, and she knew all too well that a blue dress was laid out on the bed behind her. A blue to make even a tinker woman blink, and cut as low as the original red gown hanging on the peg.
It wasn't too
That
bad,
was why she had
Nightmare.
on this
Definitely hope your
precariously
day
clean
was
shift.
good. And
One
hope you have
dress
a
like
good day
that was not
tomorrow.
enough, not according to Valen Luca. Clarine was at work on another pair in a virulent yellow, and there was talk of stripes. Nynaeve did not want to know about stripes. At least the man could let me choose the colors, she thought, working the split twig furiously. Or Clarine. But no, he had his own ideas and he never asked. Not Valen Luca. His color choices sometimes made him forget the necklines. I ought to throw it in his face. Yet she knew she would not. Birgitta flaunted herself in those dresses without a hint of a blush. The woman was certainly nothing like any of the stories about her. Not that she was going to wear the fool dress without protest because Birgitta did. She was not competing with the woman in any way.
Right,
It
which
was
is
just
Friday.
that if you have to do a thing, she growled around the twig, best you get used to it. What did you say? Elaine asked. If you're going to talk, please take that out of your mouth. The noise is disgusting otherwise. Wiping her chin, Nynaeve glared over her shoulder. Elaine was seated on her own narrow bed with her legs drawn up beside her, braiding her black-dyed hair. She already had on her white breeches, all sewn with spangles, and a snowy silk blouse with ruffles at the neck that was much too sheer. Her sequin-splattered white coat lay beside her. White. She also had 2 suits of clothes for performing, with a third in the making, all in white, if not exactly plain. If you are going to dress in that fashion, Elaine, you should not sit so. It's indecent. The other woman glowered sullenly, but she did put her slippered feet on the floor, and raised her chin in that haughty way she had. I think I may take a walk into the town this morning, she said coolly, still working at the braid. This wagon is confining. Rinsing her mouth, Nynaeve spat into the washbowl, loudly. The wagon seemed smaller by the day. To keep out of sight as much as possible. It had been her idea, and she was coming to regret. But this was becoming ridiculous. 3 days shut up with Elaine, except when they went to perform, was beginning to feel like 3 weeks, or 3 months. She had never before realized what an acid tongue Elaine had. The ship had to come. Any kind of ship. She would give every last coin hidden in the brick stove, every last penny, anything for a ship today. Well, that wouldn't attract any attention, would it? But perhaps you could use the exercise. Or maybe it's just the way those breeches fit your hips. Blue eyes flared, but Elaine's chin remained high and her tone cold. I dreamed about Egwene last night, And between going on about Rand and Kyrian, I worry about what is happening there, even if you do not. In between, she said you were turning into a screaming harridan. Not that I think so, necessarily. I would have said a fishmonger. Now you listen to me, you ill-tempered little chit. If you don't... Still glaring, Nynaeve snapped her mouth shut, then drew breath slowly. With an effort, she forced her voice to be level. You dreamed about Egwene? Elaine nodded curtly. And she talked of Rand and Kyrian? The younger woman rolled her eyes in exaggerated exasperation and went on with her braid. Nynaeve made her hand loose and fiddle with brassy red hair. Made her not stop thinking of teaching the daughter heir of bloody Andor some simple common courtesy. If they did not find a ship soon... If you can think of anything except how to show more of your legs than you already are, it might interest you to know that she was in my dreams too. She said Rand won a great victory at Kyrian yesterday. I may be exposing my legs, Elaine barked, spots of color rising in her cheeks. But at least I am not flashing my... You dreamed of her too? It did not take long to compare notes, though Elaine continued to show a viperish tongue. Nynaeve had had a perfectly good reason for screaming at Egwene, and Elaine probably had been dreaming of parading in front of Rand in her sequined costume, if not less. Saying so was simple honesty. Even so, it quickly became clear that Egwene had said the same things in both their dreams, and that left little room for doubt. She kept saying she was really there, Nynaeve muttered, but I thought it was just part of the dream. Egwene had told them often enough that it was possible, talking to someone in her dreams, but she had never said that she could. Why should I have believed? I mean, she said she'd finally recognized some spear he's taken to carrying as Seanchan work. That's preposterous. Of course. Elaine arched one eyebrow in an irritating manner. Just as preposterous as finding Sarandon and her Sredit. There must be other Seanchan refugees, Nynaeve, and spears are likely the least of what they left behind. Why could the woman not say anything without a barb? I notice how well you behaved. Elaine threw the finished braid over her shoulder, then tossed her head again, superciliously, for good measure. I do hope Rand is all right. Nynaeve sniffed. Egwene had said he would need days of rest before he was on his feet again, but he had been healed. The other woman continued. No one has ever taught him he mustn't overextend himself. Doesn't he know the power can kill him if he draws too much, or weaves when tired? That much is the same for him as for us. So she meant to change the subject, did she? Perhaps he doesn't know, Nynaeve told her sweetly, since there isn't a white tower for men. That made her think of something else. Do you think it really was Samael? Caught with a retort on the tip of her tongue, Elaine glowered at her sideways, then heaved a peevish sigh. It hardly matters to us, does it? What we should be thinking about is using the ring again. For more than meeting Egwene, there is so much to learn. The more I do learn, the more I know how much I don't know yet. No. Nynaeve did not really expect the other woman to take out the ring ter'angreal then and there, but she took a reflexive step toward the brick stove. No more trips to Tel'aran Rhiod for either of us, except to meet her. Elaine went right on without appearing to notice. Nynaeve could have been talking to herself. It isn't as though we need to channel. We won't give ourselves away that way. She did not look at Nynaeve, but there was a hint of bite in her voice. She maintained that they could use the power if they were careful. For all Nynaeve knew, Elaine did just that behind her back. I'll wager that if one of us visited the Heart of the Stone tonight, Egwene would be there. Think, if we could talk to her in her dreams, we'd not need to worry about encountering Moghedien in Tel'aran Rhiod any longer. You think it's easy to learn, then? Nynaeve asked dryly. If that's so, why hasn't she taught us already? Why hasn't she done it before this? Her heart was not in it, though. She was the one worried about Moghedien. Elaine knew the woman was dangerous, but it was like knowing a viper was dangerous. Elaine knew, but Nynaeve had been bitten. And being able to communicate without entering the world of dreams would be valuable quite aside from avoiding Moghedien. In any case, Elaine still was paying no attention to her. I wonder why she was so insistent we not tell anyone. That makes no sense. For a moment she worried her underlip with her teeth. There is another reason to talk to her as soon as we can. It didn't mean anything to me then, but the last time she spoke to me, she vanished in mid-sentence. What I remember now is that before she did, she suddenly looked surprised and frightened. Nynaeve took a deep breath and pressed both hands hard against her stomach, in a vain effort to quiet sudden flutters. She managed to keep her voice flat, though. Mogadine? Light, you do have cheerful thoughts. No. If Mogadine could come into our dreams, I think we would know it by now. Elaine gave a small shiver. She did have some idea of how dangerous Mogadine was. Anyway, it wasn't that sort of look. She was frightened, but not enough for that. Then maybe she isn't in any danger. Maybe... Forcing her hands to her sides, Nynaeve compressed her lips angrily. Only she was not certain who she was angry with. Putting the ring away out of sight, except for meetings with Egwene, had been a good idea. It had. Any venture into the world of dreams could have found Mogadine, and keeping clear of her was better than a good idea. She already knew she was overmatched. That thought rankled, worse every time she had it, but it was the simple truth. Yet now there was the chance that Egwene needed help, a small chance. Just because she was properly wary of Mogadine did not mean she was underrating the possibility. And it might be that Rand had one of the Forsaken after him in the same personal way that Mogadine was after her and Elaine. What Egwene reported, both of Cairhien and of the mountains, smacked of one man daring another to knock a chip off his shoulder. Not that she could see anything to do about that. But Egwene... Sometimes it seemed to Nynaeve that she had forgotten why she had left the Two Rivers in the first place. To protect young people from her village who had been caught in Aes Sedai webs. Not that much younger than herself, only a few years. Yet the gap seemed wider when you were the village wisdom. Of course, the women's circle in Emond's Field had certainly chosen a new wisdom by now, but that did not make it less her village or them less her people. In her heart of hearts, it made her no less the wisdom. Somehow, though, protecting Rand and Egwene and Mat and Perrin from Aes Sedai had become helping them survive, and finally, without her quite realizing when or how, even that goal had been submerged in other needs. Entering the White Tower to learn how better to pull down Moiraine had become a burning desire to learn how to heal. Even her hatred for Aes Sedai meddling in people's lives now coexisted with her desire to become one. Not that she really wanted to, but it was the only way to learn what she wanted to learn. Everything had become as tangled as one of those Aes Sedai webs, herself included, and she did not know how to escape. I am still who I have always been. I will help them as much as I can. Tonight, she said aloud, I will use the ring. Sitting down on the bed, she began to pull on her stockings. Stout wool was hardly comfortable in this heat. Most part of her would be decently clothed. Stout stockings and stout shoes. Birgitte wore brocaded slippers and gossamer silk stockings that surely looked cool. She put the thought firmly out of her head. Just to see if Egwene is in the stone. If she isn't, I will come back, and we won't use the ring again until the next scheduled meeting. Elaine watched her with an unblinking stare that made her tug at her stockings in increasing discomfort. The woman did not say a word, but her expressionless gaze implied that Nynaeve might be lying. To Nynaeve it did. It did not help that the thought had flittered on the edge of consciousness, that she could easily make sure the ring was not touching her skin when she was asleep. There was no real reason to believe that Egwene would be waiting in the heart of the stone tonight. She had never really considered it. The thought had drifted up unbidden, but it had been there, and made it hard to meet Elaine's eyes. What if she was afraid of Mogadine? It was only good sense, however it galled to admit it. I will do what I must. She clamped down firmly on butterflies in the alley. By the time she tossed the shift down over her stockings, she was eager to don the blue dress and go out into the heat, just to escape Elaine's eyes. Elaine was just finishing helping her with the rows of small buttons and muttering that no one had helped her, as if anyone needed help with breeches, when the wagon door banged open, letting in a wave of hot air. Startled, Nynaeve jumped and covered her bosom with both hands before she could stop herself. When Birgitta climbed in instead of Valen Luca, she tried to pretend she was adjusting the neckline. Smoothing identical brilliant blue silk over her hip, the taller woman pulled her thick black braid over one bare shoulder with a self-pleased grin. If you want to draw attention, don't bother fiddling. It is too obvious. Just breathe deeply. She demonstrated, then laughed at Nynaeve's scowl. Nynaeve made an effort to keep her temper, though why she should, she did not know. She could hardly imagine that she had felt guilt over what had happened. Gadel Kane was probably glad to get away from the woman, and Birgitta got to wear her hair the way she wanted. Not that that had anything to do with anything. I knew someone like you in the Two Rivers, Marion. Calla knew every merchant's guard by his first name, and she certainly had no secrets from any of them. Birgitta's smile tightened. And I knew a woman like you once. Mathena looked down her nose at men, too, and even had a poor fellow executed for coming on her by accident while she swam naked. She'd never even been kissed until Xeres stole one from her. You'd have thought she had discovered men for the first time. She became so besotted, Xeres had to go live on a mountain to escape her. Watch out for the first man to kiss you. One has to come along sooner or later. Fists clenching, Nynaeve took a step toward her, or tried to. Somehow Elaine was in between them, hands upraised. Both of you stop it this minute, she said, eyeing them in turn with equal haughtiness. Leni always said waiting turns men into bears in a barn and women into cats in a sack, but you will stop clawing at one another right now. I will not put up with it any longer. To Nynaeve's surprise, Birgitta actually blushed and mumbled a sullen apology. To Elaine, of course, but the apology itself was the surprise. Birgitta had chosen to stay close to Elaine. There was no need for her to hide, but after 3 days the heat was apparently affecting her as badly as it did Elaine. For herself, Nynaeve gave the daughter heir her frostiest stare. She had managed to maintain an even disposition while they waited, cooped up together. She had. But Elaine certainly had no room to talk. Now, Elaine said, still in that icy tone, did you have some reason for barging in like a bull, or have you simply forgotten how to knock? Nynaeve opened her mouth to say something about cats, just a gentle reminder, but Birgitta forestalled her, if in a tighter voice. Tom and Jewelin are back from the town. Back? Nynaeve exclaimed, and Birgitta glanced at her before returning to Elaine. You did not send them? I did not, Elaine said grimly. She was out of the door, Birgitta at her heels, before Nynaeve could say a word. There was nothing for it but to follow, grumbling to herself. Elaine had better not suddenly think she was the one giving orders. Nynaeve had still not forgiven her for revealing so much to the men. The dry heat seemed even worse outside, for all the sun still sat on the canvas wall around the menagerie. Sweat popped out on her brow before she reached the foot of the ladder, but for once she did not grimace. The two men sat on 3-legged stools beside the cook fire, hair wild and coats looking as if they had rolled in the dirt. A trickle of red ran from beneath a wadded cloth Tom was pressing to his scalp, down across a fan of dried blood that covered his cheek and stained one long white mustache. A purple lump the size of a hen's egg stood out beside Julian's eye, and he held his thumb-thick staff of pale ridged wood in a hand roughly wrapped with a bloody bandage. That ridiculous conical red cap, sitting on the back of his head, appeared to have been trampled. From the noises inside the canvas walls, the horse handlers were already at work cleaning cages, and no doubt Sarandon was with her Sredit. None of the men would go near them. But there was relatively little stir around the wagons as yet. Petra was smoking his long-stemmed pipe while he helped Clarine prepare their breakfast. Two of the Chavanas were studying some piece of apparatus, with Muellen, the contortionist, while the other pair were chatting with two of the 6 female acrobats Luca had hired away from Cilia Serrano's show. They claimed to be sisters named Murasaka, despite being even more disparate in looks and coloring than the Chavanas. One of the pair, lounging in colorful silk robes with Brug and Terik, had blue eyes and almost white hair, the other's skin nearly as dark as her eyes. Everyone else was already garbed for the day's first performance, the men bare-chested in colorful breeches, Muellen in gauzy red and a tight matching vest, Clarine in high-necked green sequins. Tom and Jewelin attracted a few looks, but fortunately no one thought it necessary to come inquire after their health. Perhaps it was the hangdog way they sat, shoulders slumped, eyes on the ground under their boots. Doubtless they knew they were in for a tongue lashing that would sear their hides. Nynaeve certainly intended to give them one. Elaine, though, gasped at the sight of them and went running to kneel beside Tom, all the anger of a moment before taking wing. "What happened? Oh, Tom, your poor head. That must hurt so. This is beyond my abilities. Nynaeve will take you inside and see to it. Tom, you are too old to get yourself into scrapes like this." Indignantly, he fended her off as best he could while holding his compress in place. "Leave over, child. I've had worse than this, falling out of bed. Will you leave over?" Nynaeve was not about to do any healing, despite being angry enough. She planted herself in front of Jewelin, fists on her hips and a brook no-nonsense, answer me right now look on her face. "What do you mean, sneaking off without telling me?" As well to start letting Elaine know that she was not in charge. "If you had gotten your throat cut instead of a mouse on your eye, how would we know what had happened to you? There was no reason for you to go. None. Finding a ship has been seen to." Jewelin glared up at her, shoving his cap forward over his forehead. "Seen to, is it? Is that why the 3 of you have taken to stalking about like—" He cut off as Tom groaned loudly and swayed. Once the old glee-man had quieted Elaine's concerned flutters with protestations that it had just been a momentary pang, that he was fit to attend a ball, and given Jewelin a significant glance he obviously hoped the women would not see, Nynaeve turned a dangerous eye back to the dark Tyran to learn just what it was he thought they had been stalking about like. "A good thing we did go," he told her instead in a tight voice. "Samara's a school of silverpike around a chunk of bloody meat. There are mobs on every street hunting dark friends, and anybody else who isn't ready to hail the prophet as the one true voice of the Dragon Reborn." "It started 3 hours or so ago near the river," Tom put in, giving in with a sigh to Elaine's bathing his face with a damp cloth. He appeared to be ignoring her mutters, which must have taken some doing, since Nynaeve could clearly hear, "Foolish old man," and "need someone to take care of you before you get yourself killed," among other things, in a tone easily as exasperated as it was fond. "How it began, I don't know. I heard Aes Sedai blamed, White Cloaks, Trollocs, everybody but the Seanchan, and if they knew the name, they'd blame them too." He winced at Elaine's pressure. "The last hour we were a little too personally involved in getting clear to learn much." "There are fires," Birgitta said. Petra and his wife noticed her pointing and stood to stare worriedly. 2 dark plumes of smoke rose above the canvas wall in the direction of the town. Jewelin rose and looked Nynaeve in the eyes with a hard gaze. "It is time to go. Maybe we'll stand out enough for Mogadeen to find us, but I doubt it. There are people running every direction they can run. In another 2 hours it won't be a pair of fires, it will be 50, and avoiding her won't do much good if we're torn to pieces by a mob. They'll turn to the shows once they have smashed what can be smashed in the town." "Don't use that name," Nynaeve said sharply, with a frown for Elaine that the younger woman did not see. Letting men know too much was always a mistake. The trouble was he was right, but letting a man know that too quickly was a mistake too. "I will consider your suggestion, Jewelin. I would hate to run away for no reason, and then learned that a ship had come right after we left. He stared at her as if she were mad, and Tom shook his head despite Elaine's holding it still for her washing. But a figure making his way through the wagons brightened Nynaeve. Perhaps it's come already. Uno's painted eye patch and scarred face, his topknot and the sword on his back, attracted casual nods from Petra and the various Chavanas, and one shiver from Llewellyn. He had made each of the evening visits himself, though with nothing to report. His presence now had to mean there was something. As usual, he grinned at Birgitta as soon as he saw her, and rolled his lone eye in an ostentatious stare at her exposed bosom. And as usual, she grinned back and eyed him up and down lazily. For once, though, Nynaeve did not care how reprehensibly they behaved. "Is there a ship?" Uno's grin faded. "There's a ship," he said grimly, "if I can get you to it whole. We know all about the rioting. Surely 15 Shienarans can get us safely through." "You know about the rioting," he muttered, eyeing Tom and Llewellyn. Do you know Massima's people are fighting White Cloaks in the streets? Do you know he's ordered his people to take Amadisia with fire and sword? There are thousands across the river already." "That's as may be," Nynaeve said firmly. "But I expect you to do as you said you would. You promised to obey me, if you recall." She put just a slight emphasis on the word and gave Elaine a meaning look. Pretending not to see, the woman stood, bloodied washcloth in her hand, and directed her attention to Uno. "I have always been told that Shienarans are among the bravest soldiers in the world." That razor edge to her voice had suddenly become regal silk and honey. "I heard many stories of Shienaran bravery when I was a child." She rested a hand on Tom's shoulder, but her eyes remained on Uno. "I remember them still. I hope I shall always remember them." Birgitta stepped closer and began massaging the back of Uno's neck while she looked him straight in the eye. That glaring red eye on his eye patch did not seem to upset her at all. 3,000 years guarding the Blight, she said gently. Gently. It had been 2 days since she had spoken to Nynaeve like that. 3,000 years. And never a step back not paid for 10 times over in blood. This may not be Ankara or the Saral Steppe, but I know what you will do." "What did you do?" he growled. "Read all the flaming histories of the flaming borderlands?" Immediately he flinched and glanced at Nynaeve. It had been necessary to tell him she expected absolutely clean language out of him. He was not taking it well, but there was no other way to prevent backsliding, and Birgitta should not frown at her. "Can you talk to them?" he directed at Tom and Llewellyn. "They're fools to try this." Llewellyn flung up his hands, and Tom laughed out loud. "Did you ever know a woman who listened to sense when she didn't want to?" the Glee man replied. He grunted as Elaine pulled his compress away and began dabbing at his split scalp with perhaps a bit more force than was strictly necessary. Uno shook his head. "Well, if I'm to be cozened,
How you doing?
I'll be cozened. But mark this. Massima's people found the ship. River Snake or something like. Not an hour after it docked. But White Cloaks seized it. That's what started this little row. The bad news is the White Cloaks still hold the docks. The worst is Massima may have forgotten the ship. I went to
Hope
see
you're
him and he
doing
wouldn't
good,
hear of
Fire.
ships. All he can talk about is hanging White Cloaks and making Amadisia bend knee to
Let's
the
do a
Lord
dab
Dragon
since you're
if
here.
he has to put the whole land to the torch. But he hasn't bothered to tell all of his people. There's been fighting near the river and may still be. Getting you through the
Oh,
riots
it's all
will be bad
good,
enough.
Fire.
But if there's a battle
At
at the
least you
docks, I
showed
make no
up.
promises. And how I'm to put you on a ship in White
I always
Cloak hands,
appreciate
I
when
don't
everyone
begin to
shows
know.
up.
Letting out a long breath, he scrubbed sweat from his forehead with the back of a scarred hand. The strain of so long a speech without cursing was plain on his face. Nynaeve might have relented on his language at that moment if she had not been too stunned to speak. It had to be coincidence. Might I said anything for a ship, but I didn't mean this. Not this. She did not know why Elaine and Brigitte were staring at her with such blank expressions. They had known everything she had, and neither had brought up this possibility. The three men exchanged frowns.
Hell yeah, Fire.
obviously
That's always
aware
good.
that something was going on, and just as obviously unaware what it was, for which they
And when your mind
much better when they did not
now,
know
just
anything.
because
It just had to
I'm
be.
almost out of dabs, so
In one way, she was more than happy
that's
to
what I'm
focus
going to be
on
waiting
another
on after a
woman
while.
who
I'm down to my last
It
one.
gave an excuse to pull her eyes away from Elaine and Brigitte. In another way, the sight of Galad made her stomach settle right to her
Let's see
shoes.
if I can get it for
He
you.
wore plain brown and a flat velvet cap instead of his white cloak and burnished mail, but his sword still rested on his hip. He had not been to the wagons before, and the effect of his face was dramatic. Llewellyn took an unconscious step toward him, and the two slender acrobats leaned forward, mouths open. The Chavanas were plainly surprised and scowling for it. Even Clarine smoothed her dress and watched him until Petra took his pipe from his mouth and said something. Then she went over to where he sat, laughing, and snuggled his face to her plump bosom. But her eyes still followed Galad over her husband's head. Nynaeve was in no mood to be affected by a handsome face. Her breath hardly quickened at all. "It was you, wasn't it?" she demanded before he even reached her. "You seized the river snake, didn't you? Why?" "River serpent," he corrected, eyeing her incredulously. "You did ask me to secure you passage." "I didn't ask you to start a riot." "A riot?" Elaine put in. "A war, an invasion, all begun over this vessel." Galad answered calmly. "I gave Nynaeve my word, sister. My first duty is to see you safely on your way to Camelin, and Nynaeve, of course. The children would have had to fight this prophet soon or late." "Couldn't you simply have let us know the ship was here?" Nynaeve asked wearily. Men and their word. It was all very admirable sometimes, but she should have listened when Elaine said he did what he saw as right, no matter who was hurt. "I don't know what the prophet wanted the ship for, but I doubt it was so you could take passage downriver." Nynaeve flinched. "Besides which, I paid the captain your passage while he was still unloading his cargo. An hour later, one of the two men I left to make sure he did not sail without you came to tell me the other man was dead and the prophet had taken the
Do
ship.
another dab.
I don't understand what you were so upset about. You wanted a ship, needed a ship, and I got you one." Frowning, Galad addressed Tom and Julian. "What's the matter with them? Why do they keep staring at one another?" "Women," Julian said simply, and got slapped on the back of the head by Brigitte for his trouble. He glared at her. "Horseflies have come," she grinned, and his glower faded into uncertainty as he readjusted his cap. "We can sit here all day discussing right and wrong,"
Yeah,
Tom
cheers
said
to you too,
dryly,
Fire.
"or we can take this vessel. Passage has been paid, and there's no getting the price back now." Nynaeve flinched again. However he meant it, she knew how she heard it. "There may be trouble reaching the river," Galad said. "I donned this clothing because the children are not popular in Samara at the moment, but the mobs can set on anyone." He eyed Tom doubtfully, with his white hair and long white mustaches, and Julian a little less so. Even the center of the column looked hard enough to pound posts. And then turned to Uno. "Where is your friend? The sword might be useful until we reach." Uno's smile was villainous. Clearly there was no more love between them than at their first meeting. "He's about maybe one or two more. I'll see them to the ship if your white cloaks can hold on to it, or if they can't." Elaine opened her mouth. Nynaeve spoke up quickly. "That's enough, both of you." Elaine would just have tried honeyed words again. They might have, but she wanted to lash out at something, anything. "We need to move quickly." She should have considered when she flung two madmen at the same target what might happen if they both hit at once. "Uno, gather the rest of your men as fast as you can." He tried to tell her they were already waiting on the other side of the hedge, but she plowed on. They were madmen, both of them. "Galad, you..." "Eyes," Luca's shout cut into her words as he trotted between the wagons, limping, and with a bruised, discolored look on his face. His scarlet cape was soiled and torn. It seemed Tom and Julian were not the only ones to have entered the town. "Brugh, go tell the horse handlers to take the teams. They'll have to abandon the canvas." He grimaced at the words. "But I mean to be on the road in under an hour. Andaya, Kua, pull your sisters out. Wake anybody still asleep, and if they're washing, dress dirty or come naked. Hurry, unless you're ready to proclaim the prophet and march to Amadisia. Chin Akima's lost his head already, along with half his performers, and Celia Serrano and a dozen of hers were flogged for being too slow. Move!" By that time, everybody except those around Nynaeve's wagon were at the run. Luca's limp slowed as he approached, eyeing Galad warily, and Uno for that matter, though he had seen the one-eyed man twice before. "Nana, I want to talk to you," he said quietly. "Alone." "We will not be going with you, Master Luca," she told him. "Alone," he said, and seized her arm, hauling her away. She looked back to tell the others not to interfere and found there was no need. Elaine and Birgitta were hurrying off toward the
Oh,
canvas
my day's
wall
been
in
all right.
towards the menagerie,
Can't complain.
and except for a few glances at her and Luca, the four men were engrossed in conversation. She sniffed loudly. Fine men they were to watch a woman manhandled and do nothing. Jerking her arm free, she strode along beside Luca, silk skirts swishing her displeasure. "I suppose you want your money now that we are going? Well, you shall have it. 100 gold marks.
Hell yeah,
Though I
fire.
think you should allow something for the wagon and horses we're leaving behind, and for what we've brought in. We have certainly increased the number of your patrons. Morellin and Julian with their high walking, me with the arrows. Tom, do you think I want the gold, woman?" he demanded, rounding on her. "If I did, I'd have asked for it the day we crossed the river. Have I asked? Did you ever think
No
why
shit,
not?"
hell yeah.
In spite of herself, she took a step back, crossing her arms beneath her breasts sternly.
Yeah, my
And
brother
Birgitta
gave
wished she had not. That stance more than emphasized
the
what
ones
she was
outside
experiencing. Stubbornness
some
kept her
feeding
arms
today.
where they were. She was
Gave
not
him
about to
a
let
top
him think she
amendment
was
on it,
flustered,
watered him
especially
real
since
good.
she was. But surprisingly, his eyes remained on hers. Maybe he was ill. He had never avoided looking at her bosom before, and if Valen Luca was not interested in bosoms or gold, if not about the gold, then why do you want to talk to me? "All the way back here from the town," he said slowly, following her. "I kept thinking that now you would finally go." She refused to back away again, even when he was standing over her and staring down intently. At least he was still looking at her face. "I don't know what you are running from, Nana. Sometimes I almost believe your story. Morellin certainly has a noblewoman's manner about her, at least. But you were not a lady's maid. The last few days I've half expected to find the pair of you rolling on the ground, tearing one another's hair. And maybe Marion in the pile." He must have seen something on her face, because he cleared his throat and hurried on. "The point is, I can find someone else for Marion to shoot at. You do scream so beautifully anyone would think you were truly terrified, but..." He cleared his throat again, even more hastily, and drew back. "What I am trying to say is that I want you to stay. There's a wide world out there, 1,000 towns waiting for a show like mine, and those chasing you will never find you with me. A few of Akima's people and some of Celia's who haven't been marched off across the river, they're joining me. Valen Luca's show will be the greatest the world has ever seen. Stay? Why should I stay? I told you from the first we only wanted to reach Gildan, and nothing has changed. Why? Why, to have my children, of course." He took one of her hands in both of his. "Nana, your eyes drink my soul. Your lips inflame my heart. Your shoulders make my pulse race. She cut in hurriedly. "You want to marry me?" she said incredulously. "Marry?" He blinked. "Well, yes, of course." His voice picked up strength again, and he pressed her fingers to his lips. "We will be wed at the first town where I can arrange it. I've never asked another woman to marry me." "I can quite believe it." she said faintly. It took some effort to pull her hand free. I am sensible of the honor, Master Luca, but Valen, Nana. Valen. But I must decline. I am betrothed to another. Well, she was, in a way. Lan Mandragoran might think his second ring was a gift, but she's and I am going. I should bundle you up and carry you with me. Dirt and rips somewhat spoiled the grandiloquent flourish of his cape as he drew himself up. With time, you would forget the fellow. You try it, and I'll have Uno make you wish you had been sliced for sausage. That barely deflated the fool man at all. She drove a finger hard against his chest. You do not know me, Valen Luca. You don't know anything about me. My enemies, the ones you dismiss so easily, would make you take off your skin and dance in your bones, and he would be grateful if that was all they did. Now I am going, and I don't have time to listen to your drivel. No, don't say any more. My mind is set, and he will not change it, so you might as well stop blathering. Luca sighed heavily. You are the only lady for me, Nana. Other men choose boring flutterers with their shy sighs. A man would know he had to walk through fire and tame a lioness with his bare hands every time he approached you. Every day an adventure, and every night. His smile almost earned him boxed ears. I will find you again, Nana, and you will choose me. I know it in here. Thumping his chest dramatically, he gave his cape an even more pretentious swirl. And you know it too, my dearest Nana. In your fair heart you do. Nynaeve did not know whether to shake her head or gape.
That's crazy.
Men were mad. All mad. He insisted on escorting her to her wagon, holding her arm as if they were at a ball. Stalking through the turmoil of horse handlers rushing to hitch teams, the din of men shouting, horses whickering, bears growling, leopards coughing, Elaine found herself muttering under her breath to match any of the animals. Nynaeve had no room to talk about her showing her legs. She had seen the way the woman stood up straighter when Valen Luca appeared, and breathed deeper, too. For Galad as well, for that matter. It was not as if she enjoyed wearing breeches. They were comfortable, true, and cooler than skirts. She could see why men chose to wear men's clothes. Almost. There was the problem of getting past the feeling that the coat was really a dress that barely covered your hips. She had just managed that so far. Not that she intended to let Nynaeve know, her and her viperish tongue. The woman should have realized Galad would ignore the cost of keeping his promise. It was not as if Elaine had not told her about him often enough, and involving the prophet. Nynaeve just acted without thinking about what she was doing. Did you say something? Birgitta asked. She had gathered her skirts over one arm to keep up, unashamedly baring her legs from blue brocaded slippers to well above her knees, and those sheer silk stockings did not hide as much as breeches. Elaine stopped dead. What do you think of how I am dressed? It allows freedom of movement, the other woman said judiciously. Elaine nodded. Of course, it's good that your bottom isn't too big, as tight as those. Striding on furiously, Elaine tugged the
Yeah, that
down with
Starlink
sharp fingers.
internet setup.
Nynaeve's tongue had nothing on Birgitta's. She really should have required some oath of obedience, or at least some show of proper respect. She would have to remember that once it came time to bond Rand. When Birgitta caught up to her, wearing a sour expression as if she were driven almost beyond endurance, neither of them spoke. Dressed in green sequins, the pale-haired Shanshan...
But how fast would your internet speed be, though, for that much?
His head pushed the heavy wagon holding the black-maned lion's cage. A horse handler in a shabby leather vest held the wagon tongue, steering the wagon around to where its horses could be hitched more easily. The lion stalked back and forth, lashing his tail and now and then giving a hoarse cough that sounded like the beginning of a roar. Sarandon, Elaine said, I must speak to you. In a moment, Merlin. Fixed on the tusked gray animal as she was, her quick, slurred way of speaking made her nearly unintelligible. Now, Sarandon, We have little time. But the woman did not halt the Sredit and turn until the horse handler called out that the wagon was in position. Then she said impatiently, "What do you need, Merlin? I have much to do yet. And I can't change. This dress is not for traveling." The animal stood waiting
I
patiently.
might have to look
behind
into
her.
that.
Elaine's mouth tightened slightly. "We are leaving Sarandon." "Yes, I know. The riots. Such things should not be allowed. If this prophet thinks to harm us, he will learn what Mare and Sunnet can do." She twisted to scratch Mare's wrinkled shoulder with her goad, and he touched her shoulder with his long nose. A trunk, Sarandon called it. "Some prefer Lopar or Grom for battle, but when properly used." "Be quiet and listen," Elaine said firmly. In an effort to maintain her dignity, with the Shan woman being obtuse, and Brigitte standing aside with her arms folded, she was certain Brigitte was just waiting to say something else cutting. "I do not mean the show. I mean myself and Nana and you. We are taking ship this morning. In a few hours we will be beyond the prophet's reach forever." Sarandon shook her head slowly. "Few river craft can carry Sredit, Morella. Even if you found one that can, what would they do? What would I do? I do not think I can earn as much by myself as I can with Master Luca. Not even with you high-walking and Marion shooting her bow. And I suppose Tom would juggle. No, it is better if we all remain with the show." "The Sredit will have to be left behind," Elaine admitted. "But I am sure that Master Luca will take care of them. We will not be performing, Sarandon. There's no more need for that. Where I am going, there are those who would like to learn about—" She was conscious of the horse handler, a lanky fellow with an incongruously bulbous nose, standing close enough to listen. "About where you came from. Much more than you've told us already." No, not listening. Leering. By turns at Brigitte's bosom and at her legs. She looked at him until his insolent grin turned sickly, and he scuttled back to his duties. Sarandon was shaking her head again. "I am to leave Mare and Sunnet and Naren to be cared for by men who are afraid to come near them? No, Merlin. We will stay with Master Luca. You too. It is much better. Remember how bedraggled you were the day you came? You do not want to return to that." Drawing a deep breath, Elaine stepped closer. No one but Brigitte was close enough to overhear, but she did not want to take foolish chances. "Sarandon, my true name is Elaine of House Trakand, daughter heir of Andor. One day I will be Queen of Andor." Based on the woman's behavior the first day, and even more on what she had told them of Shanchan, that should have been enough to quell any resistance. Instead, Sarandon looked her straight in the eye. "You claimed to be a lady the day you came, but—" Pursing her lips, she eyed Elaine's breeches. "You are a very good high walker, Merlin. With practice, you may be good enough to perform before the Empress one day. Everyone has a place, and everyone belongs in their place." For a moment, Elaine's mouth worked soundlessly. Sarandon did not believe her. "I have wasted quite enough time, Sarandon." She reached for the woman's arm, to haul her along bodily if necessary, but Sarandon caught her hand, twisted, and with a wide-eyed yelp, Elaine found herself on tiptoe, wondering whether her wrist would break before her arm came out of her shoulder. Brigitte just stood there, arms folded under her breasts, and had the nerve to raise an eyebrow questioningly. Elaine gritted her teeth. She would not ask for help. "Release me, Sarandon," she demanded, wishing she did not sound quite so breathy. "I said release me." Sarandon did, after a moment, and warily. "You are a friend, Merlin, and always will be. You could be a lady one day. You have the manner, and if you attract a lord, he may take you for one of his Asa. Asa sometimes become wives. Go with the light, Merlin. I must finish my work." She held out the goad for Mare to curl his trunk around, and the big animal let her leave him ponderously away. "Sarandon," Elaine said sharply. "Sarandon!" The pale-haired woman did not reply. Elaine glared at Brigitte. "A great lot of help you were," she growled, and stalked off before the other woman could reply. From what I hear and what I've seen, you have spent considerable time teaching the woman she has a backbone. Did you expect me to help you take it away from her again? I was not trying to do any such thing, Elaine muttered. I was trying to take care of her. She's a long way from home, a
I had to
stranger
clean that
wherever
up
she
again.
goes, and there are some who would not treat her kindly if they learned where she came from. She seems well able to take
Let
care
that
of
cool
herself,
down,
Brigida said
then I'll
dryly.
take another one.
But then, perhaps you taught her that too. Perhaps she was helpless before you found her. Elaine's stare seemed to slide off her like ice sliding down warm steel. You just stood and watched her. You are supposed to be my... She glanced around. It was only a glance, but several of the horse handlers ducked their heads away. My warder. You are supposed to help me defend myself when I cannot channel. Brigida looked around too, but unfortunately there was no one close enough to make her hold her tongue. I will defend you when you are in danger.
One of my
But
dogs
if the
over here
danger
is
is only of being turned
snoring.
over someone's knee because you've behaved like a spoiled
Both of them
child,
snore, but
I will have to
surprisingly,
decide whether it's better to let
the
you learn a
smaller
lesson
one,
that might save you the same or worse another time.
the
Telling
smaller
her
one
you
will
were
snore
heir to the
louder than the
throne?
big one.
Really? If you are going to be Aes Sedai, you will
Hell
start
yeah,
practicing how to
fire.
bend the truth.
I'm not sure
not
what this
break
one
her into
was. I got this
shards.
one off my cousin.
Elaine gaped. It was not until
I
she
traded
stumbled
some
over
of what
one
I
feet that
had,
she
the
managed
Island
to
OG,
say,
and he traded me
"But
this
I
one.
am."
In more
"You
Acapulco
said
gold,
so,"
nice.
Brigida said, rolling her eyes at the spangled
I smoked
breeches.
last of my
Elaine
freak
could
show
not help
today,
herself.
so
Nynaeve wielding
I'm
her
out of
tongue
that
like
now
a needle,
already.
Sarandon stubborn as two mules, and now
But I
this.
did go
She threw back her
like
head
I
and
always
screamed
do.
with frustration.
I say I'm not going to
When
do
the
it, but I
sound
still
died,
do it.
it
But
seemed as if the animals had quieted.
I actually wrote
Horse handlers stood
a
about,
lot of
staring
joints
at
out
her.
of it.
Coolly, she ignored them. Nothing could worm its way under her skin now. She was as calm as ice, perfectly in control of herself. "Was that a cry for help?" Brigida said, tilting her head. "Or are you hungry? I suppose I could find a wet nurse in..." Elaine strode away with a snarl that would have done any of the leopards proud.
What the little one does too.
Chapter 48.
I haven't heard Snoopy do it yet, but the
Once
little
she was
one,
back in the
Tuffy,
wagon, Nynaeve changed
when he
into a
gets
decent
down
dress
like
with
a
few
deep sleep, he'll
exasperated
start
moans for having to undo one
like
set
giving
of
off like a
buttons
little
and
bark
tack another by herself.
in his sleep.
The plain grey wool, fine and well cut, yet hardly elaborate, would pass without comment almost anywhere, but it was decidedly warmer. Still, it felt good to be decently garbed again, and somehow odd, as if she were wearing too many clothes. It must be the heat. Quickly, she knelt in front of the small brick stove with its tin chimney and opened the iron door on their valuables. The twisted stone ring was fast nestled into her belt pouch beside Lan's heavy signet ring and her gold great serpent. The small gilded
Well, he's not even a
containing
puppy,
the gems
Tuffy.
Amathera had given her went into the leather script with the pouches of herbs taken from
He's
Rama
over
Matura
10.
in Mardisen, and the
I think he's
small
like
mortar
11 or
and
12
pestle
years
for
old.
preparing them. She
But he's a
fingered
little
through the
Shih
latter
Tzu.
just to remind herself what each contained, from heel all to that dreadful fork-tongue root. The letters of rights went in as well, and 3 of the 6 purses, none quite as fat as it had been after paying the menagerie's way to Gildan. Luca might not be interested in his 100 marks, but he had had no qualms about collecting his expenses. One of the letters authorizing the bearer to do whatever she wished in the name of the Amerlin seat joined the rings. No more than vague rumors of some sort of trouble in Tar Valon had reached Samara. She might find a use for it, even with Swan Sanche's signature. The dark wooden box she left where it sat, next to 3 of the purses, as well as the rough jute bag containing the eidam. That she certainly had no wish to touch, and the silver arrow Elaine had found the night of the calamitous encounter with Mogadine. For a moment she frowned at the arrow, contemplating
And that's why
it was best
my
to do
smaller
whatever
one,
was necessary
Tuffy,
to avoid her.
snores the way he
It
does.
I bested her once,
Is
and had
because
been hung up like a sausage in the kitchen the second time.
when my
Not for
aunt
Brigida.
got him, he was
She
a
made her
toy
own
Shih
choice.
Tzu.
The woman
He
had
was
said
like
so, and it
tiny,
was true.
tiny.
I could defeat her
But
again.
now
I
he's the
could,
size of
but if I failed,
a full-size
she
Shih
failed.
Tzu. But
was
the
only
reason
trying
that
to avoid the
happened
wash
was
leather
because
stuffed right to the back, and she knew it.
when he was
Yet there
when
was
he was
not
a
hair's difference
puppy,
for ugliness
he
between
had
the
real
purse and
bad
the thought of losing to Mugadoo
sinus
again.
problems.
Drawing a deep
So they
breath,
had
she gingerly reached in and took
for
it up
some
by the
reason they
drawstrings,
put him. They
and
gave him
knew
like
she had
2
been
rounds
wrong.
of
Evil
steroids.
seemed to bathe her hand, stronger than
It
ever,
helped him
as
out,
if the Dark One
made it
was
better
trying
for
to
him.
break
But
through the Quendiyar seal
he's
inside.
the size of a
Let her do
full-size
well
Shih
all
Tzu,
day on defeat
solid
by
white.
Mugadeen. There was a world of difference
Watch, let
between
me see if I
thought
can
and
grab him
reality.
for you real
It
quick.
had to be
You know,
imagination.
wake his ass
There
up.
had been no such feeling in Tanchico, but she wished she could let Elaine carry that too, or leave it there. Stop being foolish, she told herself firmly. It holds the Dark One's prison shut. You are just letting your fancies run wild. But she still dropped it like a weak dead rat onto the red dress Luca had made, then went and tied the thing securely with more than little haste.
Okay, buddy.
The silken parcel went into the middle of a bundle of clothes she was taking with her. Inside
Yeah, he's
his
solid
gray
white.
traveling
He's a
cloak.
little dirty right
A
now.
few inches
I
distance
know
was
I
enough
woke
to
you
take
up,
away the
buddy. I'm
sensation
sorry.
of dark bleakness, but she still wanted
There
to
you go.
wash her hand. If only she did not know it was there. She was being foolish. Elaine would laugh at her, and Birgitta as well, and rightly. Actually, the clothes she wanted to keep.
This one, not so much. This one's
and she regretted every stitch she had to leave behind.
he's lazy in
Even
his
the
old
low-cut
age.
blue silk. Not that she ever wanted to wear anything like it again. She did
He'll
not
go
intend
out
to
once
touch
in,
the
when I
blue
let him
dress
out, but
until she handed the intact
once in a
package
while
to
he'll
Miss
get all
Salidar.
a little
But she
hyper,
did
want
not
to play,
like
but
topping up the cost of clothes, horses,
not
and wagons
too much
of
more.
value
He's
since leaving Tanchico.
he's a
And
lazy
the
stoner
coach,
dog.
and the barrels of dye. Even Elaine would have
Need to
winced
give
if
him a
she had
haircut
thought it.
again.
That young woman believed there would always be coin when she reached into her purse. She was still making
Yep,
the
he's a
second
Shih
bundle
Tzu.
when Elaine returned and silently changed
She
into
got
a blue
that
silk dress. Silently,
that
except
Shih
for
Tzu
mutters when
face.
she had to double her arms behind her to fasten the buttons. Nynaeve would have helped, had she been asked, but since she was not, she examined the other woman for bruises while she changed. She thought
He's
she heard
cool,
a scream
dog.
only minutes before
I've been
Elaine
around
arrived,
him since
and she and Birgitta had
the
actually
day
come
my
to
aunt
blows.
got him.
She was not certain she was glad to
And I
find
told
him.
her
A riverboat would be
pretty
just
much when
as
she
fine
got
as
him
this
that
wagon in its own way.
if she
And
ever
less
got
than
rid of
pleasant if
him
the two women were at one another's
or
throats.
wanting to
But then
sell
again,
him
it might have helped
or
had they worked
just
off
get
some
rid of them or
difference
sell
in
them, to let me
terms.
know that I'll take them.
Elaine said not a word while she gathered
And
her own belongings, not even when
it took a
Nynaeve
little
asked
while, but she
quite
finally
amiably
gave them to me.
where she had gone herring off to as if she had sat on
But
a
she
coffee barrel.
couldn't
That got
she couldn't
only
put
a
up with
dazed,
him no
ashamed,
more.
chilly stare,
He's
as
a
though
tad
the girl
stubborn
thought she was
sometimes.
already on her mother's throne. Sometimes Elaine was even more silent, in
Oh
a way that
shit.
said far more
Yeah,
than
this
words
one's
could.
full Shih Tzu.
Finding 3 purses remaining, she paused
My
before
aunt's
taking them,
boyfriend
and the temperature in the wagon lowered
got him
considerably,
from
though the
California,
purses were only her share.
and when he got him, he
Nynaeve
actually
was
had to
tired
get
of
him.
carping over how she doled out
When he got him,
coins.
he was like
Let the woman
already
watch them
fixed
dribble
by the
away,
the owners. That
and
was
realize there might be no
I
more
guess the
for some time.
stipulation in getting him.
When Elaine realized the ring was gone, though, and the dark
But I
box
guess
still
his
sitting
parents
there,
were show dogs,
Elaine hefted the box and opened the lid,
so he
pursing
paid
her
a
lips as she
a
studied
good
the
little amount
contents.
for him.
The other 2
But like I said, they gave him the rounds of steroids, which
a small iron disc
puffed him up to a full Shih Tzu.
and a narrow
But yeah, he's a
clasp 5
full-blood
inches
Shih
long,
Tzu.
seemingly amber, yet harder than steel, and with a sleeping
You
woman
have to show him
somehow carved
when he get
inside
him his haircut.
Either could be used to enter
Gotta give him a real good bath.
though not so easily or so well as could
He's
the
real
wind.
good about that too. In the bath, he'll just
Channel spirit, the sort
depending
of
whether
one
I
that
give it
flies
to him in the
higher up
bathtub or the
channel
sink.
sleep.
Either way,
It
he'll
seemed
just
only
stand
right
there
to
like
Nynaeve,
all
leaving
nice
them
and
for
still.
Elaine, since she was taking charge
Then,
of the
because I'll
wagon.
give him a bath, and my brother
Closing the box with
gives
a
him the
sharp
haircut.
click, Elaine stared
And
at
the
her,
way we give him the
absolutely
haircut, we lay him
expressionless,
down
then
on his side
stuffed
long
into
ways,
one
and
of
my
her
brother
bundles
just goes
alongside the silver
with the
arrow.
clippers,
Her silence was thunderous.
gets them all cut down on one side,
Elaine also
his
made
legs
2
and all that, then
bundles, but hers were
flip him
larger.
over to the other
She
side
left
and
nothing out except the
shave him
side
down, and
boots and breeches.
he's real
Nynaeve
good about
refrained
it,
from
and just
suggesting
lays
that she
there.
overlooked them. She should have, with the sulking that was
'Cause
going on, but she knew how to promote harmony.
we could,
She limited
there is
herself to one
several
sniff when Elaine
dog
ostentatiously
groomers in
added to
town,
her
but
to her things.
they
Though
have
from the
waiting
look she
lists,
got in
and
return,
they're
you would have thought
expensive.
she had made her objections known at length. By the time they left the wagon, the quiet could have been
So we
checked
just do it
against
ourselves.
the chill wine. Outside, the men were
As long
running
as the clippers
and
ain't real
muttering to
loud,
themselves
he's
and
good.
throwing impatient looks at her
Cause
and Elaine.
he's
It was hardly
he doesn't
fair.
like loud noises.
Galad and Uno
It
had
makes him
nothing to
jump
compare.
and like run away and
Tom's
get
feeble
all
harp hung on his back in
like
leather cases,
with his anxiety
along
all
with the
out of
small
control.
bundle, and Jewelin, notched sword breaker at his belt and leaning on his head-high staff, wore an even smaller
Yeah,
bundle
but I've had
than
him now
Jewelin.
since
Men
my aunt
were
gave him
willing
to
wear the
me
same clothes until they blotted off.
about
Of
4 or
course,
5 years
Brigitte was
maybe.
ready too, bow in hand, quiver at her hip, and a
But
cloak
he just
wrapped
be my
round
little
her
buddy
legs
since my
not
aunt got
much
him.
smaller than one of Elaine's.
I used to
Nynaeve
get him
would
all
not have put it past
nice and
Brigitte to have
stoned
Luca's
when he
dresses
was a
in there,
puppy.
but it was what she wore that gave a
Because it
moment's
was when me and
pause.
my brother
Her
were
divided skirts could
yeah,
have
they
been
definitely
the
got
enormous
attitude,
trousers she had
stubborn
worn in
as hell,
Talahan-Riod, except for being
and
more
set in their
gold than
ways.
yellow, and not
But
being
yeah, when he was a
completely
puppy, I
headless.
would get him all
The
stoned
short
because
blue
we're staying
cloak
at
was identical in cut.
our mom's
The
house for a little
mystery of
bit
where
while
the brothers had come from was
they're fixing
solved
this
when
place up
Feline
so we can
scurried
rent
up,
it, so we can
chattering
get
that
here
she'd
and rent
taken
it.
too long with two more of the
But while
skirts
we're
of another
there,
coat to fold
he'd
down
go to
to
my
his
room
bundle.
because
She
I
stayed to
stayed
say
in
how
the extra
sorry she
bedroom
was
there.
that they were leaving the show,
He'd come to my
and she
room,
was not the only one to take a
get
few
all
moments from the
stoned with
bustle of
me,
hitching
chill
horses
there
and
for a
packing up.
minute,
Aludra
and
carried
then
wishes
go
for a safe journey wherever they
to the
were
front
headed
room
in
where
her Paraboner accents,
our
and
mom
with
and
two
aunt
more
were.
boxes of her fire sticks.
I guess
Nynaeve tucked
he'd
them
go in
into the
there,
strap with a
throw a
sigh.
big old grub, and
She had
then
made a point
go
of
lay
leaving the
down.
others behind, and Elaine had pushed them to the back of the
But
shack
whenever he
behind
wanted
the
to come
sack of
chill with
beans,
me and get
when she
stoned,
thought Nynaeve
he'd
was
go
not
from
looking.
chilling in
Edra
there
offered
with
to help escort them to the river,
my mom and aunt and
pretending not to see his
come to
wife's
my
eyes
room and
tighten with concern,
get all
and so
stoned,
did the
chill out, and
Chihuahuas and Kin and
go
Bari the
back.
jugglers, though when Nynaeve told them there was no need,
Then when
they
we got
gave a
this
frown.
place,
They could barely hide
every
their
time I
grief.
went over there,
She
he'd get
had
all
to speak
happy. Then
quickly, for Galad
my
and
aunt
the other men
would
on the
tell
point
me
of accepting.
pretty
Surprisingly,
much
even Latel
to
appeared
take him with me
pleased
for the
with words of
weekend.
regret, smiles,
She
and
said to get him
eyes
all
that said
stoned
she
and
would carry their bundles if it
have
saw them
time over
gone
there
home
because
sooner.
I guess he
Nynaeve was
was
surprised
pissing her off.
Sarandon did not come, though
So
in
I
a
was
way she
taking
was
him
just as glad.
over here on the
Elaine
weekends to
might get
chill,
on
and
famously with the woman, but since
it
the
went from
incident
that
where she
to
had been
a
assaulted,
little bit longer. Then
Nynaeve had felt a tension whenever she was
he
around
became
her,
mine.
perhaps the more because Sarandon gave no outward sign of the same. Luca himself
And it definitely
was
calms him down.
full of pitiful
I know,
drowsing
like during like
wildflowers at Nynaeve,
4th of July and New
where
Year's
found
and like
them,
all
with
the other holidays
protestations
have
of
to do with
undying love, extravagant
fireworks
praises
and
for her beauty,
the other
and
people
dramatic
that
vows
shoot
to
their
find
guns
her
off
again
and
if they had to
whatnot.
travel to the corners of the world.
At the
She was not
dispensaries
sure
around
which
here, they
made her
have
cheeks grow hotter, but her
CBD
frosty
dog
stare
treats.
wiped the grin from
And we
Julian's
usually give
face
them the dog
and
treats because
astonishment
the
from
CBD
Una's.
helps calm them down
Whenever
to where
Tom and Galad thought they had
they'll
enough
be
sense to keep their
the
features
fireworks
smooth,
and
she could not make
gunshots
herself
be
look at
going
Brigitte
off.
or Elaine.
And instead of him being
The
all
worst was
skittish
that
and
she
like
had to stand there and
all
listen,
nervous and
wilted flowers drooping over
whatnot,
her hand, her face
he'd
growing
just lay
redder.
there all calm, and
Trying to send him away with
half
a
the time
fleeting
he'd
tear
just
would
be
likely
out.
only
So
have sparked him to greater efforts,
it
and given
definitely
the
helps
others
them
more
that,
fodder
or
than they already
I
had.
was getting him
She very nearly heaved
nice
a sigh
and
of
stoned,
relief when
and
the idiot man finally bowed
he
himself
mellows
away
out for
in elaborate flourishes
during
of his
that
cane.
that
She held
time
on to the flowers,
night
striding
for
ahead
the
of the
fireworks
others
and
so she
whatnot.
did not have to see their faces, and angrily shoving bundles back into place when they shifted, until she was out of sight of the wagons around the canvas wall. Then she threw the bedraggled blossoms down so violently
Well, he
that
gets
Rega and the rest of
scared.
the rough-clad
It
Chihans,
scares him real
squatting
bad.
halfway across the
Any
meadow to
loud
the men,
noise, but especially
exchanged
fireworks, he
glances.
gets real scared,
Each
and
had a blanket-wrapped bundle on his
yeah,
back,
he don't like
small,
it.
of course, alongside his sword, but they were hung about with enough water bottles to last for days, and
Almost
every
two.
third man had a pot
Yeah,
or
let's
kettle
make this the
dangling
last
somewhere.
dab.
Fine. If there was cooking to be done, let them do it.
Yeah, I still got to fold
Not
all kinds of
waiting
laundry
to
too.
decide whether she was safe to approach, she stalked out to the dirt road alone.
She did that for while I was doing this, but I didn't feel like making all y'all watch me sort and fold laundry.
Glenn had never given her flowers. Not that was of any
Oh
account.
shit.
He had expressed his feelings in words deeper and more heartfelt than Valen Luca could ever manage. She had meant every word to Luca, but if Lan said he was going to carry you off, threats would never stop him. Channeling would not stop him unless you managed it before he turned your brain and your knees to jelly with kisses. Still, flowers would have been nice. Nicer than the explanation of why their supreme. Men and their word. Men and their honor. Was he? Him and his personal war with the
Pause
shadow.
this.
He was going to live.
I'm gonna call it the end of this live for right now. But I want to thank everyone for stopping by and everyone who keeps stopping by, chilling with me. Definitely appreciate all y'all's support. Till next time, everyone. Y'all stay safe out there.